Miss Moore was a peculiar old hag, and the whole town of Lincoln, New Hampshire knew so. Every day at about 3:45, Miss Moore would walk the streets. She did so every day, whether sleet or hail, whether sun or rain, and she always wore the same garish thing, a black, wrinkly dress that dropped down low over her graying white socks, and a wide-brim hat to match, with a veil that cast down across her face. A widow through and through, at least for the past 17 years. And at the end of her arms, a pair of white gloves that reached to her elbow, and within her grasp, each and every time, the handle of a death-black stroller with a large overhanging cover on top. That was, as she told anyone who asked, where she kept Mr. Muffins on their walks. Now, no one had ever seen Mr. Muffins, and according to many, neither had Miss Moore. If one were to ask, well, what kind of dog is he? Then Miss Moore could be inclined to respond, why, he's a shy little terrier, he is. Or she could say, Mr. Muffins is just a timid little pom-pom. Or still, some have heard, Mr. Muffins is, well, he's actually just a stray little kitty who likes to keep me company. And they have to ask, because, as everyone who has ever tried harshly finds out, you can't ever look at Mr. Muffins. Adults and kids alike have all tried and tried, but Miss Moore is adamant and fierce, frighteningly so, especially for her age. Many have gotten close, tried to peek inside, tried to lift the blankets inside, but to do so always incurred Miss Moore's vicious wrath. Never afraid to swat a hand or slap a face, Miss Moore was a force to be reckoned with. For whatever reason, she was sure as hellfire never going to let any man, woman, or child ever look at and disturb her precious Mr. Muffins. It, of course, left many to speculate and gossip about what exactly Mr. Muffins really was. There were some, mostly those that were older and friendlier to the eccentric old lady, who just had to take her word that there was nothing inside the old stroller but some kind of pet that she loved most dearly. They would often be fast to claim that, if you pass her on the street and listen close, there is something certainly breathing and moving in there. However, most others would agree that whatever Miss Moore carried around with her every single day was something else entirely. Some would claim that she was, well, partially right. They liked the notion that, perhaps, Mr. Muffin was a pet at one point. The idea of Miss Moore carrying around a cart full of bones carried a certain loony charm. Others further believed that maybe it was something truly strange, like a pet gator or a snake. Something that she'd, understandably, would want to keep a bit more concealed. It would explain the noises. To ask the most eccentric, however, would be to invite lunacy. For many still claimed that the reason for her mournful attire was that inside that cradle, she carried the remains of her dear departed husband. They would tell you that Mr. Muffins was her pet name for the man, and that she took him out every single day at the time that he died. Crazy theories, but that was all anyone could do. No one was close to the woman. No one knew the truth about what Mr. Muffins really was. No one. However, there was one person who can claim what no one else can. There was a man who had seen inside the carriage. Everett Flores had seen Mr. Muffins. It had been a chill afternoon, sometime in October, when Everett and his friend, a boy named Douglas Snow, hatched a plan to see inside the old bat's stroller. It was a plan that worked to perfection. As she passed by on their street, that fateful afternoon, Everett hid behind a row of bushes that Miss Moore would have to pass, At the moment she was getting ready to, from the other side of the street, young Douglas Snow purposely missed the shot on his basketball hoop. The ball went wild, straight across the street, and hit Miss Moore right on the head, causing her to stumble and release the cart. Douglas ran across the street, feigning sincerity in his rambling apologies. As the old woman massaged her head and tried to regain her wits, Everett Flores crept forward. On his knees, he peered into the stroller as Douglas Snow reached Miss Moore's side, trying intently to distract her. She didn't care for his apologies, telling the young Mr. Snow to scram and leave me alone. She would have continued to berate him too, had she not noticed Everett still leaning over inside her carriage. And to this, she had a reaction that Douglas had not expected. He had anticipated hellfire, vengeful fury, and hateful curses. Instead, all Miss Moore could do was raise her hands to her mouth and wail. Her screeches were sharp, cutting, and painful. Douglas took the chance, as Miss Moore brought her hands to her face, covering her mouth, to go over and grab Everett Flores by the shoulders. Yanking him hard, he dragged Everett away, unable to get him fully onto his feet. He knew that something was wrong right there and then. Everett said not a word. As they crossed the street, Douglas heard the old woman lament aloud. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Mr. Muffins. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Please." Douglas reached the curb and tripped over Everett, causing them both to fall hard onto the ground. Douglas landed on top of Everett, and Everett's face hit the concrete sidewalk hard. Douglas said that she turned to him in that moment before she turned the corner of the block to flee, and she shouted, "He'll get a taste for it. He'll get a taste." Douglas had no idea what she meant by that, but when he looked down to Everett to see what was wrong, he didn't know what to say. Everett's eyes were red and full to the brim with blood. Doctors told Everett and his family that he'd popped blood vessels in his eyes, and, with time, they'd heal. They said they weren't sure if it was from the fall or something before. The fall had given Everett a concussion and a few scrapes and bruises, but other than that, Everett seemed completely fine. On the outside, at least. According to Douglas, Everett didn't say much after that. In fact, he never spoke a word about Miss Moore or Mr. Muffin ever again. Yet another ailment that the doctors explained away. Temporary amnesia caused by the concussion. Douglas never bought it, not even for a moment. He always attested, and surely still does to this day, that whatever happened to Everett wasn't caused by the concussion. In the next few years, before Everett moved away halfway across the country for college, Douglas said he never once told him what he saw. He would always tell Douglas, "I don't know. I don't remember anything." But Douglas could always see it, he would say. He could always see it in Everett's eyes. A deep regret, a deep fear, unmistakable, unforgettable. Their friendship fell apart as the years stretched on, to the point where Douglas had lost track of Everett entirely. Strangely enough, it seemed the rest of the world lost track of him as well. Everett Flores went missing 5 years ago, and vanished from his home in Arlington, Washington, 5 years after his incident with Miss Moore and Mr. Muffins. To everyone but Douglas, the two incidents were completely unrelated, and Everett Flores was never found. Still, Miss Moore continues to roam the town every day at 4:45, with Mr. Muffins tucked safely in his stroller. And still, she insists quite harshly that you don't peek. "Don't you dare," she'll say, with a weak old smirk. "If you do, you might just get a taste for it." Whatever it might be.